Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see a little link down below. You can click on it. If you click on that link, it'll take you to Zoom. In Zoom, you'll see another link. You click on that, and you'll end up in Mukana. And in Mukana, you become a producer of the show. You actually drive the questions that we answer. There really isn't a plan here other than we're going to get up here and answer a lot of questions. And so it's really important that you ask questions and also that you vote on those questions. And so it is important to get in there. Let us know. We spend a little bit more time on the top of the hour than the bottom of the hour. Now, if you think you can answer some of those questions, then join the panel. You just need to be here by 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to test your system, or 6:40 a.m. really is the deadline to be here for the mic checks. So you have to be here for mic checks to be part of the panel. So plan that out. And then, you know, the way it pretty much works is we have first hour is open questions, whatever questions that you may have around media or virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to have Todd Reynolds, who joined. It was funny. He came on once and we were like, oh, we should bring him in for a second hour. And now he's been here all the time. So it's like, so anyway, so Todd Reynolds is going to be joining us talking about how he does what he does and how he brings it to, and this is the beginning of a series where we're going to start slowly working through our panel. So about every other week, we're going to have somebody from our panel that we just kind of get to know a little bit better. So this is it's about every other Thursday. You can expect us to be talking to somebody here as we kind of move through that process. Friday, we're going to talk. The Remotes have a new song. The first song was amazing. They tell me that the second song is better. Actually, I know that it's better because I've already heard it, but it's great. And so they'll be rolling it out for you tomorrow. So it'll be great to hear that. And then of course Saturday we have education. Reminder that education is not being broadcast right now. We're just dealing with a lot of nuts and bolts of stuff that we're working on. So anyway, that's what we have. Bill, let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Absolutely. And let's start with Chirik Jahida of Dallas, Texas, who says, slowly transitioning back to in-person productions, have used Vmix exclusively for 14 months, moving back to Blackmagic Design hardware. Anyone using a good combo of the two for productions?
I haven't tried to mix the two. I've thought about it. So, you know, I think that there's two things that I think Vmix does really well is using it at, you know, for some of the graphics that you may want to do. And that can be either before they go into the ATEM or after they go into the ATEM. And so you could be doing, you know, a couple of the raw cuts and then being able to add more graphics and more bits and pieces. That kind of fluidness, I think, is one place that Vmix and Blackmagic can potentially work together. Go ahead, Jesse.
I'd say DeckLink Duo 2 card is almost essential if you're building a PC. They're super versatile. You can have 4 ins or 4 outs or 2 and 2, whatever you want. It's pretty much plug and play.
Yep. So there you go. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. And Douglas says, if you were rebuilding a venue to be a stream broadcast first facility, not sure if stream and broadcast, but anyway, what specifically would you think about first?
Bandwidth. So the first thing is bandwidth. Yeah, go ahead, Leland.
Yeah, it's always infrastructure. If it's not bandwidth, it's power supply, and make sure you have a clean one and plenty of it and a failover in case, you know, built-in generators are always a good thing to consider when you're going for a studio build like that, especially those that are gas-powered instant on generators. So think about those things when you're going for a new build.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of fiber, audio treatment, lighting, you know, those kind of core essentials in any building will help you along the way.
As you start to move towards, those are the basic things that you do for almost any event. And the three of us all mentioned things that you should have. As you start to look at a digital first event, there's a couple things that I'm actually working on a couple of these locations right now. And the first thing that we do is how is the speaker going to be able to see the audience? And we're not trying to figure out how they see them in the room, because pretty much the spaces that I'm working on have nobody in the room, you know, and so it's really how does the speaker powerfully interact with the online audience? And so that can be a mixture of you know, there's Immersive Studio Designs, IDS. You can see what they're doing. They were the ones that started off with Tony Robbins. Disguise is being used for a lot of those things. So LED walls, large projection, or even just large monitors to make sure that the speakers can see who they're talking to. It is important. Like you know, I'm not saying that it's not important. I think that it's actually important, though, that how do we have the speakers be able to really see them so that they can really interact with them, and also how do we keep them looking at them? Eye contact becomes super important. So having cameras with teleprompters that they can see the person that they're talking to, or one of the things that we're starting to experiment with is the idea of knocking out a LED panel. And some of these are pretty small. You can get ones that are smaller panel increments, pulling one of those out and putting the cameras in there so that they're actually in the middle of the screen that the speaker is looking at. Also just against the projection wall. So you have basically the camera sticking out of a screen that's being projected against. And so those types of things to kind of get that eye contact pulled back into the system. So being able to do that, being able to handle how you're going to handle the two-way communication between the speaker and the online audience becomes, more and more important to make that work. I do think that the future of many facilities will be a digital first solution where they're not building for any audience to be in the room. And because they're going to slowly learn what a lot of us learned that have been doing it for the last 10 years is that you can't pay attention to people in the room and pay attention to people online very effectively. I mean, it's just you're fighting a million years of evolution. And a human being will always look at the people there. So it's super. Those are some of the things that we're thinking about as we start to design these early facilities, but we think that they're probably going to be the future. Go ahead, Bill, and then Leland.
When I started to change a hay barn into a studio years ago, the very first thing I started thinking about was sound as opposed to video, because you're really in this whenever you're doing video, you want more space, be able to move cameras around, get different angles and things like that. But that same large space that makes video easier, big ceiling height for lighting, makes audio more difficult. So I think sound first.
Yep, Leland.
Yeah, and he's right on the money. And the mention of sound I wanted to make is because you're talking about a stream broadcast facility, first off, you are dealing with echo cancellation when you're dealing with online broadcasting. So you do have to consider in a big way how you bounce that sound around the room, because you could cut your own audio out if you're bouncing it too much.
It's one of the big advantages of a digital first facility as opposed to a hybrid facility is that you don't have to have any open speakers. So you can use IFB and Phonak. We were just working with a studio yesterday that uses Phonax. Phonak is it's normally a hearing aid, but if you do Phonak broadcast, you'll see all the tools that they have for broadcast. And in a smaller facility, they cover it, and it's literally like the Jack Bauer, put it in your ear kind of thing, wireless. And so you can have it be wire free, all those things that are just right in someone's ear. And there's no reason for you to have an open speaker in the room. And so that's one of the big advantages of a digital first event, is that you don't have to deal with many of the issues that you have to deal with hybrid. Hybrid just creates a whole bunch of feedback loops that are very difficult to manage. Number one is that the speaker will look at the people. like that is the number one problem that you have. As soon as the speaker's eye line goes down, eye line is everything when it comes to average view time. So how long people stay engaged, how long they listen to the message, everything else is eye line. And so as soon as you put people in the room, the speaker will just go right. I was doing a record yesterday with two people in the room that are supposed to be talking to the camera, immediately start talking to each other. And so the thing is that now you are, when the speaker is speaking to another speaker somewhere else in the world, the audience is in between. When the speakers are talking to each other, the audience is on the outside. When they are talking to the audience in the room, the audience is in the back of the room, the online audience. And so that's what you're fighting, and so that is fundamentally why hybrid will never end up working. It'll end up just getting wiped out for the most part, except for people with old ideas trying to, rehash, glory days. Next question.
Comes from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. And Paul says, what is the boom headset of choice for professional sportscasters? Do they use USB or XLR?
Guys got it on.
I threw one on real quick. I had to grab it. You're not hearing this one right now, but this is the Sennheiser HMD 25-2. It's a popular one. It's got an XLR and a 1/4 inch on the tail end. You can order them in different configurations, even pigtail, so you can put on your own. But yeah, it's 1/4 inch and then XLR. And then one of the cool things about this one is you can flip up the other side. So if it's actually rotates. So you can do things like, have other headpieces in or hear your environment and then flip it back down. And then it's got you can't really see it, but on top you can actually adjust how much spacing there is on what goes over your head. So pretty cool. Sennheiser HMD 25 -2.
Go ahead, Karl, and then Chris.
And just like Guy, the 27, which is the over ear. So for some people who are in stadiums who are actually on the side, what we call sideline commentators, they need to be able to hear everything. And this one has a condenser mic as well. So this one has a high quality mic for talent.
Those slides. All right, we'll get over it eventually. But every time the slide comes, you're like, dag nabbit. Between guys showing it, wearing it, and then Karl showing the slides, next generation. All right, Chris.
Absolutely. You know, when I read that question from Paul, when he said that a boom headset, I thought he was using boom as an adjective, you know, like awesome or dope or, hey, dude, what's the boom headset that everybody's using?
By the way, it's not going to run for much longer, but if you guys want to see a HDR live stream, if you go up to the YouTube/Alex Lindsay, there's a morning stream next to the stream that you're watching right now. If you're watching it on YouTube, you'll see if you have to have an HDR monitor, but if you want to see it, it's streaming live at the moment. I'm going to turn it off in a couple minutes because I'm pushing it through AWS and paying for every minute, and 4K HDR costs more than regular to stream. So anyway, but just as a little note. Next question.
Richard Lavery here in the panel, Belfast, UK, says, Karl, would you mind explaining the keying for the Lower Fenwick again, please?
So there's two versions of this. So Chris Fenwick gives us a pre-alphaed channel. So that's actually quite good because we can just use pre-multiply key in either downstream or upstream. So that's one. When I've done it, I've done with black backgrounds, similar to what Alex has done in his slides as well. If that's the case, then you'll need to turn off pre-multiplied. And as Alex has said in the past, you play around with it, but you'll get to around 7% for the sorry, you go 100% for the gain and 7% for the clip, and then make sure you don't have inverse on, and then you should get clean. And as Alex has said in the past, and as I went through Husmuk yesterday, if you have images that have black in them, and the black in that image is being keyed as well, you can take the image in Keynote and just change the contrast to -2%.
Yep. Now go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I've been keying stuff for a long time, and I have an analogy in my head that I want to visualize someday. If you think of water, think of like a pier in the water, and everything that is above the water level you can see, and then it's water. So your clip level is how deep the water is. But imagine, you know, a beautiful tropical island, and you look at it from the sky. So there is clearly the dry part, which you see, but then you can see how the sand feathers out into transparency, or, you know, get the ocean gets deeper. And when you're dealing with something that we used to call a linear key as opposed to a luminance key, you get those levels of transparency. There's a visualization thing I need to make one day, but if you think about that, it changes the way you think about keying.
And that's why when you start bringing the gain down, you start adding that softness back in. So the clip is very low because you're clipping out 0 to 7% or 0 to 10%. And then you're pulling as you lower the gain, you're allowing more of those colors back in so that you can get those softer grays again out of a straight Luma key. Next question.
Alex 40 Goldner is up from London, and he says, I'm about to spend a few weeks away from my desktop external monitor for my 15-inch MacBook Pro. Any recommendations for a portable external display for while I'm on the road?
Go ahead, Guy.
iPad Pro 12.9. So then you can just drag stuff over, and now you have a device that you could put cellular in, and then this could actually be your hotspot as well. So that's the way I use it. Is if I'm in a hotel room, I just pop this and set it up next to it, and then I can drag stuff over. So if I'm editing, I have an extra space for my media bin or whatever needs to be tossed over their script. So yeah, iPad.
That's great. Any other I think Acer makes kind of a self USB powered one that is kind of nice, but I haven't played with it. The only complaint I had with some of the ones that fold out on their own is they vibrate a lot when you type around them or you touch them, and so they're not as stable as I'd like. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say you also may consider just a quality road case for your other monitor and just take it with you.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, those portable monitors are sort of okay. Much better job.
Go ahead, Beju.
Yeah, Asus and Lenovo both make decent ones. There's Lipao and a few other Chinese brands that make them as well.
They are decent. You just need to make sure, like there are some which are only USB-C, others can do USB-C or HDMI. So depending on how you plan to use them, you might want to select the option you want. They start at about $100, $150 to about $400 for a 4K. One thing you should take care is they are extremely delicate. They have literally no protection on the LCD. So if you even put a little bit of extra pressure on it, you might end up cracking it. So be careful with them if you get one of those.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Real quick. Sorry, there was a bomb going. If you get the right hotel, you can always use the TV monitor for that. Just have to check with the front desk and see if you can actually connect up your laptop to the monitor.
Yeah. Next question. Let's go.
Moving on to Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas says, would you be concerned that the Epic Games Apple legal dispute will impact the future of the Unreal Engine on Mac? From my observations, it seems Unreal Engine is the market leader in the live production industry, and a lot has been invested in it.
Go ahead, Aaron.
So Epic is based here in North Carolina, and so I know a lot of people there. Their Unreal Engine is not part of the business equation with regard to Apple. So I don't anticipate them switching. They want to get as much Unreal Engine out there as possible, and Apple doesn't take a cut of that. So the problem isn't that Apple.
The fundamental challenge that they're going to have is that Apple is probably going to have the front end of AR. Everyone was playing with it, but Apple is building a huge pipeline for that, and Apple's probably going to leave Unreal out of a lot of it. That's the challenge for a lot of folks that are building it. Is the future really isn't Unreal for broadcast is fine, and a bunch of us that'll use it. The real challenge is Unreal for AR, and Unity is actually more built for AR than Unreal is, and so and Apple is building its own tools, and so I think that the problem is that we saw something that there was a great relationship building there that's now done forever. And so that is the fundamental challenge for Unreal. It's a lot of us are paying attention to it. I'm spending a lot of time in Unreal at the moment, and but you just have to keep on watching how it goes. But you'll notice that they were part of the keynotes up until recently, and now they're not. And Unity got mentioned in WWDC. So Jesse, real quick.
I feel even before the lawsuit, Apple really doesn't support Unreal that well anyway. So it's always had a lot more features on the Windows desktop, and this is probably just going to keep more and more off of the Apple platform.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas is next. And Rupert asks, Zoom says using virtual backgrounds to turn any location into an office, quote, close quote, helps create equity between in-office and remote workers. Does this make sense to anyone?
Yeah, I understand the thought process. I don't think it's a strong thought process. The idea is that if everybody in the office and out of the office uses some kind of virtual background, then they all look bad. So they all equally look bad and silly. And so I get that, but there's no reason for us to why would we tie our legs together on purpose? Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, one of the interesting things there that Sam did in his presentation in the Zoom test kitchen was he didn't have a green screen. And so he said he's limited to 1280 by 720. And I was like, that's interesting. I mean, the computer doesn't have enough horsepower, I guess. And so they squash it down. So if you have a 1920 by 1080, account, you're all of a sudden everybody's squashing down. Unless they actually use a real green screen. And so anybody who's actually doing this, please use a real green screen if you're going to use that, because it'll fill in a lot of those holes and some of the just bad keying that you're getting from not using a proper green screen.
Once you've invested in your own system at home, I would much rather attend a meeting from my house than in person. Like I sound better, look better, like I can, get there. There's a lot less driving, that's required, or parking or anything else. So after all these meetings of all these things, unless I'm going to actually handle something, I would rather just do this over Zoom, but that's only because I've got a system that's set up for it, and I've got, and I think that what people should be thinking about, sure, people can do all that stuff with virtual events. If you invest, anybody who's looking to move up in an organization, sell bigger projects, everything else, should not be looking at how to keep it even. They should look at how do I take advantage of that opportunity. And taking advantage of that opportunity is a better camera, better mic, better lights, better internet connection. That's how you do that. And all of us should be looking at that as an opportunity for us, especially the time when it's the biggest opportunity is when no one else is doing it, because you stand out a lot. And so, and I see it every single day that I join a meeting, and I would much rather do it virtually than in person. Next question.
Rupert McRae is right back from Dallas, Texas with another one. Any good or bad examples of company team building events over Zoom? No names necessary.
I don't think I have any examples of it. I think Arts is a pretty good example of team building, not necessarily for a company, but repeated discussion. Yeah. Next question.
Let me just weigh in on that a little bit, because I've seen a couple of my clients try to do things. I think anything is better than nothing. So the little trivial contest, take a name and enter, anything to increase the team spirit, as opposed to just sitting up and doing a presentation with nothing, can help, because people do get more engaged, and particularly when they ask the participants 4 questions with
the interaction with the audience is the key to the operation.
Absolutely, and the better ones do some of that.
But you don't have to do all the you don't have to do all the silly stuff, because every time companies do silly things, you have a whole bunch of people that are just like, why am I doing this? I definitely will admit that I'm one of those people that I don't go to things like Tony Robbins because I don't want to stand up and jump around. I'm just like not interested. I just want the protein, and so that's the challenge. Go ahead, Leland, and then Jeffrey.
I had the fortunate ability to work with Doug Ferguson on the pro event for the Major League Soccer, which was the professional referees organization. And that was their kickoff for the 2021 season. They got all the referees together to go over last year's footage, and then went into breakout rooms that allowed them to discuss in detail and have people just out of the blue talk about issues that were present during those events. So there was that team building that took place for the referees themselves to be able to get better at their job, know how to make better calls, know how to work better with the teams, and be able to fight COVID's limitations in the process.
And discussion, you're bringing us right back to discussion is what people want to do live. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I dealt with a lot of enterprise companies before pandemic that had Zoom in their offices, little individual cubes and things like that they could go to. And there was this one company that actually had a wellness officer that would make it their job to go, and anybody that was remote, go ahead and call them up and not really say, hey, are you okay? But just kind of start a conversation, see how they're feeling from there. So maybe just have somebody going around and talking to people one-on-one, and just find out a little bit more about them, their interests, and see if they're okay.
Next question.
Gabriel Ung in Malaysia says, what are the best practices to run NDI and Dante on the same network? I hear that keeping them on separate VLANs is best. Devices in the network need both NDI and Dante signals as well as a wide area network connection.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, I'm doing just that right now, setting up a new facility with the Netgear M4250 series. And yeah, you do have to, the best practice is to create separate VLANs and also have an NDI discovery server. So when those VLANs have their own subnet, the NDI sources and destinations can jump to different subnets. And also you want to have 2 NICs on each machine, one for NDI, one for Dante. And on the Dante NIC, you want to block the NDI ports.
Are there any NDI cameras, native cameras, that have Super 35 sensors that we know of?
I've been kind of looking into that, but they're usually the Ajas or the older Mac. I got to get the brand.
I didn't think so. Next question.
John M. Gerard, Berkeley, California. Hi, all. This is for my brother again. Keep it simple. Mike, he'd like to get something like a Blue Yeti that has built-in USB or an SM58. And then if he does the 58 with the XLR connector, what adapter does he need? He has a PC. What about a stand for the mic? He does not have a lot of desk space.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Sure, MV7 is what I'm using, and I think it's a great value. It's $250.
Yeah.
Has USB and analog audio and a a monitor and a headphone jack right on the end of it. So it works great.
Yep. Jesse?
So this is the Blue Yeti Nano. I'm not using it now, but I used it for a year. It's pretty nice mic, $100, plugs directly in with USB.
For anyone getting started, I think I would stay away from the adapters unless you think you're going to go to unless you're going to go to some kind of interface down the road. I mean, I think that the Yetis with XLR as well as the MV7, I think also have that, or SM7V also have USB and XLR. So you have those options later. Go ahead, Karl, and then Bill.
Yeah, so as Aaron said, if the Yeti had a baby with an SM58, it would be the MV7. So it's a dynamic microphone, but it's easy to plug and play. It's USB. As Aaron said, it's $250. There's a lot of people on the panel do have these as well, so they're quite good.
Yeah. And I've gone through lots of converters. Unless I'm going to buy a real interface, I would get something with a USB. Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
There are two different stands that types in general. The cast iron base kind of circular thing that relies on weight to keep any mic upright. There's also the little mini tripod kind of thing. The tripods are lighter, more agile, but you can also knock them over easier. So just make sure that whatever mic you go with, the stand has enough support to keep it from flopping around.
Yeah, and I would definitely use some kind of movable stand rather than I would use one that's clipping onto your table. I use an underslung Ultima from OC White, but Heil makes a great one that's nice and quiet and does a great job for their mics, but for other mics as well. So there's kind of an overarm or underarm, and all of those are ones that you want to, that I think that you could do really well with, but attaching it and being able to swing it in and out is really important. Next question.
Moving on to Chris Earl of Maitland, Florida. If I am on a companion profile page on my StreamDeck, XL M1 Mac Big Sur is his rig, and I use my Mac mouse or keyboard, the StreamDeck bounces back to its default profile. Is this a bug or a configurable feature?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So StreamDeck has this option to switch profiles for a program. If you open up, I don't know, Final Cut Pro, it could actually switch to a bunch of buttons for Final Cut Pro. You have to go into the settings and tell it which profiles and if it's a default program or a specific program. If there is a default program, no matter what, it'll always flip back to that one.
Next question.
Guy Cochran is up next from the panel in Seattle. Roland has a new video mixer out. How does it compare to others? And he's got a link there.
You want to give us an overview, Guy?
Jonas actually has a better grasp on it. Go for it.
It's I have a picture. What's cool is it has a lot of I/O, and how they market it is a mixer for a one-man band that wants to do a hybrid. What's really interesting in their videos, they actually show like a Zoom laptop farm where they have multiple Zoom laptops that are then connected. And what I really like is how many outputs they have. And every output is routable. So even the USB-C output, which you then would use to stream or go into Zoom, that one is routable. You can have 3 HDMI outputs, 3 SDI outputs, all custom routable, 16 inputs, XLR in and outputs. It's a really nice box. And
how much is it?
I think 5K.
Mm-hmm. Looks really cool. Yeah, and so you would still use something external to stream from it, but you'd be able to do, a lot of the switching. Yeah, and I think that go ahead.
Even has like PDT controls, options to shade cameras, all that. It's pretty close.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was looking at it after I saw the question being posted. Is there a concern that it's $5,000 for a system that's limited to 1080p 60, or is that okay for the functionality?
I think most people are going to be streaming at 1080p for a while. So it depends on how long you have to have it run. Go ahead, Karl.
So there is a bit of a skew with how Blackmagic does their prices. So Roland is probably more normal for their prices. Blackmagic is a little bit lower for their prices for what you get for the money. So if you take a look at any other brand, Roland would still be in the lower end of the price at $5,000 for 16 inputs. But Blackmagic do deliver something that's at a very good price value, I think.
I think the fundamental challenge for everybody in that kind of sub $10,000 hardware range is the ecosystem that Blackmagic has. So you can have this, but there's the thing that exploded is with the minis. So the minis and the mini extremes and the mini pros and everything else created this massive market that's much larger than everybody else's hardware market. And that combined with an open API means that there's just a lot of innovation that's happening inside of that ecosystem in a way that is hard. So the Roland just has to be able to do what you need it to do when you buy it. The big thing that we're moving towards is the ATEM being the hardware, expression of a ton of software. That's running it, that's doing a lot of things that we'll never be able to do, in a switcher itself. Go ahead, Aaron.
Another thing to think about with Roland, their firmware updates have been few and far between in the past. I don't know if they've changed that at this point, but bugs take a while to get fixed. And yeah.
I think that if you're not using Blackmagic cameras, if you're not familiar with Blackmagic, if you have a very specific use case that this fits perfectly, I think it's going to be a great switcher. I think that as a Blackmagic user, you look at it and you just go, "Oh, it's cute." like it's not something that you go, "Oh, I wish I had that," because of all the other. If you're using the ecosystem fully. Next question.
Chris Comfort here on the panel from New York. New York says, I recently updated my desktop app for the ATEM Mini, and now I can't access the hardware device through the software. The ATEM is working fine on its own. In fact, he's using it now. But aside from the obvious of reinstalling the old app, any other suggestions as to why it's broken?
Well, the firmware and the software have to match. So that might be the... they don't have to match perfectly, but they do have to match. So if you've updated the desktop software, you have to open up the setup software on the ATEM. And have you done that already, where you've run the firmware update?
I can't access the unit at all, so I almost have to do the firmware first. But I updated the firmware not too long ago before, but it was two separate events. So
are you connected through the USB or IP or over the Ethernet?
USB.
So I would try Ethernet. So you need to get them into a switch. Give it you want to put both of them into a switch and then give it a manual. Well, actually you can't. So you have to figure out what.
Well, it is asking for a manual IP. Because I'm not hooked up like that currently, I just haven't dealt with it yet. I haven't had time. I've been pretty busy the last couple of weeks.
If you put it on the network, it should the software should be able to see it over the network. Okay. Without knowing what its IP is. So if it doesn't, then I would call it Blackmagic. Sure. Like there's something very wrong.
But can I
at
just
that point
uninstall the newer app and then just reinstall from my original? Yeah.
And then what you want to do is, if you do that, if you want to install back up, you just need to make sure that. But it sounds like what that sounds like when you can't see it. Usually you can see it and it'll ask to update it. But if you can't see it, it may be just that for some reason they're disjointed there. Go ahead, Beju.
Yeah, Chris, one question I wanted to ask is that when you have the ATEM software open and when you click on connection, there is an option to join by device name and join by IP, manual IP. If you go by device name, are you seeing the device at all, or that field is showing up as blank? Because sometimes it gets confused there. You need to switch it back and forth a little bit, and it does show up, because I had a similar issue a couple of days ago. And one other thing for other people, not directly for Chris, is sometimes because the ATEM has a limit of number of active connections to the control page. If you're using something like Mix Effect or Companion at the same time, you can end up using all those connections. So if you then launch the software afterwards, you won't be able to connect to it till you close one of the other connections.
Next question.
Comes from Chris Earl from Maitland, Florida. And Chris says, I had asked about the video screen scraping of Zoom into a switcher early this week. What are the options for getting individual audio tracks for those same remote Zoom participants? I'm on a hobby grade budget, whatever that means.
And now you've gotten the rub. So this is the thing that Zoom can't do currently, which is you can't get individual audio tracks out of Zoom without using separate connections. So that's where you have to. What we do to do that is to have different people jump, and we put them into each breakout room, and in each breakout room we have a Zoom room, and now we have individual audio. That increases the latency, but it does give us complete control over the audio. There's not really any way that we know how to get around that yet. And that's a problem against all of these because of the way that the reflectors work. Go ahead, Jeffrey, real quick.
Yeah, the only other way is if you have them record at their source.
Well, I think this is for a live though. This is getting into a switcher. So
yeah, but they could still record their audio on a separate recorder or something like that.
If they're
I've done that before.
for post, but I think that the goal here is to get it into a switcher, which I'm going to assume getting into a switcher means a live show. So that's the challenge. Now you could, if you have all the one thing that we have thought about getting around it is using something like Unity, where they open up Unity on a desktop and they all can talk, and then you're getting separate connections for each person, and then you use Unity Connect to pull it all out. So there's a harder way to do that, but maybe not as expensive as getting hardware, so that it's possible to go down that path. Next question.
Comes to us from Douglas Carmichael, and no location given. With technology platforms like Mukana, Swapcard, and Zoom, why do you think InfoComm 2021 is returning to an in-person format in Orlando? And do you think the trade show era is on its way out? He attended virtual NAMM and enjoyed it immensely, he says.
Trade shows will be largely gone in 10 years. I'll give you that prediction. like they're not gonna, like we're kind of moving past it. We haven't figured it out yet, so that there's a handful of them. There's still people that want to do that. But the problem is that people are realizing, I mean, we deal with this every single day, that people are realizing that they were giving up a huge part of the market because they were forcing people to come to something. And when they stop doing that and they build an infrastructure that includes the whole world, they're getting much larger response. And a lot of them are making a lot more money. And so down the road, eventually that wins. Go ahead, Jonas.
I also have seen companies do it just because they still have the contracts, because they just postponed the execution of the contract. So we'll see at least 1 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Still, because they are just postponed and they're still in contract. Something to think about.
Absolutely. But the scale is the scale of the digital events are going to get so much bigger than the physical ones that eventually it's not gonna add up anymore. Next question.
Jesse in Los Angeles says, how does John Ittelson feel about us affectionately calling the Etsy recommended Mute Cube the IttelBox? But unfortunately, John isn't here.
It's the IttelBox.
The IttelBox.
I think it's a good, I don't think John minds. So we'll, it's an IttelBox. All right, next question.
He makes a smaller one. Can it be the Ittle Bitty box?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
next question.
Jesse again from Los Angeles. Please explain the process of setting up the ATEM for the Lower Fenwick, the overlay graphic showing audio chain. We did this, didn't we? I think two people.
Well, we talked through it a little bit, but I don't know if we can. I don't know how quickly I can show it in that way. Yeah, go ahead, Karl.
I was just thinking that we can come back to this, Jesse, tomorrow, and I can put a little slide deck together, going through step by step.
Yeah, ask that again, and Karl will have a great keynote for it. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and Douglas says, Alex mentioned that Unity has supported the Mac more than Unreal Engine has. A friend of mine has worked extensively in Unity. Could Unity be used for event production work? He's trying to decide which to learn, but the UI seems more marketable. UE, Unreal Engine, seems more marketable.
I didn't say that. I said it's more towards AR, not towards Apple necessarily. So, but I think that I think Unity took a very much of a computer first experience, and Unreal took a broadcast first experience, or broadcast enabling experience, which is doing things like 2997 and time code and outputs and so on and so forth, which made it very viable in that area that Unity decided not to invest in. But Unity is focused more on those other bits and pieces. And so in the long run, especially now that Unreal gave them a huge step up. I mean, I think people were forgetting about Unity until Epic picked a fight with Apple. So like it was the best thing that, the Epic fight with Apple is the best thing that ever happened to Unity. Go ahead, Aaron.
Also keep in mind that Unity is a much smaller company than Epic. So their resource constraints are much higher.
Well, I think it's still like an $18 billion company. It's not
right,
tiny,
but I didn't mean it was tiny, but it's a much smaller business and much more focused, actually. So
yeah. Next question.
Nick Gutfriend of Bedford, New York says, working for a finance company, integrating video from consumer brands into a larger presentation. I'm regularly surprised that I'm not supplied the 4K video files that I request. Does the panel find this surprising?
A lot of people just don't have those assets. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I worked in advertising for a good amount of time, and I'm not at all shocked. There's been decades of producing things, and sometimes they would say the only thing we have available for classic lines is SD stuff. So getting them into HD was slow. Getting them into 4K is going to be even slower. They are all producing in that now, but I think it's going to be a while before the breadth of content is available.
And it just it depends on the brands. I mean, most of the larger brands we've worked with haven't touched 1080p for 4 or 5 years. But the smaller brands will have more trouble with that. They just didn't master it in that area. Go ahead, Karl.
Yeah, some brands may not want to give out the 4K to you, so they've paid for that content, and that content probably wasn't cheap to make, and so the HD version is what they're willing to share, and that's probably what we'll go off on YouTube as well. But they hold on to the 4K for what they want.
Next question.
Guy Cochran of Seattle is up with, according to Zoom change logs, screen share will be able to be pushed to breakout rooms. What's a good use case?
So is that a screen share across all breakout rooms? That's interesting. I mean, I think that announcements, to tell people, okay, now like imagine a breakout, like talk amongst yourself, and you could be changing what the opportunities are, like what are the things that you should be talking about right now? You could have slides doing that. Definitely, with screen share, you could pump video into that so that now you're able to talk to all of the breakout rooms at one time. It's exciting. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, etiquette would be the biggest thing for me. So you could go into a room and say, this is what you can talk about. This is what you shouldn't swear or anything like that because you are live in our system.
I mean, one of the things that we had pitched a show that didn't happen, where we were going to have about 150 breakout rooms, and one of the things was we wanted to be able to leave them in the breakout room the entire time, so never bring them back into the plenary. So they basically have, you have tens of thousands of people, but they're all in these little groups, and those are generally birds of a feather type of thing. Like all the people from this region or all the people that are interested in this get to stay in the same group, discuss things. But when there's a plenary discussion, it's going out to everyone. So using that, we were going to basically join every room, it's just push content into every room the same way that a Tony Robbins type thing would happen. But this would potentially make that easier if you have video screen share or video optimized screen sharing able to go to, all the rooms. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, just things like prompting and questions for hosts in lots of different places would be a fantastic use for that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. Next question.
Comes from Stuart Fairweather, who was here for the pre-show and then didn't come back because he was having some issues with his system. And I think that's what he's talking about here. From Melbourne, Australia, those who saw the pre-show saw the weird stretch of my NDI virtual input into Zoom's NDI monitor showed the correct here. The two controls that affect it returning to correct aspect are the touch up my video and adjust for low light Zoom bug. And basically he had what we lovingly refer to as Hulk mode that popped into his process, and he was trying to track down why that had happened to him and what to do to fix it.
Interesting. So I guess that builds up a theory that touch up my appearance and adjust for low light could cause other instability. So that's a good note for us. Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, instead of using NDI, you should just use the external mode, call it a day. I mean, I haven't had Hulk mode ever since I just kicked on external, where you just take the output that way, and it puts a little more pressure on the CPU. But I mean, to avoid having any kind of issue like that, just push it in through the external.
That's great. Next question.
Michael Vosbein, Woodstock, Georgia. A bit more on recording separate audio. Is it possible to do a one-on-one interview rather than a whole panel and get two discrete audio recordings?
Go ahead, Karl.
So yeah, that's what office hours does when we use the Zoom rooms in breakout rooms. So the Zoom room is a one-on-one out, and you can have multiple people in multiple Zoom rooms, and it's one-on-one back to office hours essentially.
When we do the interviews, we put people in two different computers, and then we get the two different feeds. I don't know. You can do it if you want to record those. If you don't want them live, if you want to actually record separate audio, Zoom will do that. So if you go into the Zoom section, you can have it record separate tracks for people, and so Zoom will record those separate tracks for you. Just make sure to practice it. There's a couple of settings there that can make it funky. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, and if you're doing it for post, you can kind of show people how to move their volume to one side or the other, so you can have technically the stereo run, but one on left and one on right.
If they have the tools to do that. Next question.
Ron DeMuth in Great Falls, Montana says, would a Behringer mixer UMC 404 HD and the Heil PR40 be a good matchup for podcasting or YouTube broadcasts?
The Behringer is, I mean, yeah, I mean, it probably is fine. I don't have any experience with that Behringer. Go ahead, Karl.
Yeah, that's the Behringer I own. So that does 192. If you're going to be going into Zoom or anything, make sure you set it to 48. So it's a high resolution. It is very good. It has very good preamps from Midas, but just make sure you're at 48 kilohertz with that one. Don't run it at 192 and 20 software.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Stefan Fletcher of Würzburg, Germany. Hi, is there any documentation available, like a drawing of the system you plan to set up to enable everybody to do better live shows?
Yeah, so the system that eventually we'll have, the first step is we're going to be figuring it out. So there's no drawing yet because we're still figuring that out. so we're still, it's still the concrete hasn't even been poured yet. But as it gets better, one of the things that we want to do is start making that system more available. So we're basically, the first step is we're separating out the hardware from 090's hardware. Just the basic pieces. We may end up using parts of 090's hardware as needed for larger shows, but for the day-to-day office hours, we want to separate that hardware out. Then we're going to figure out how to, Andy's coming out to work on it. We're going to be figuring out how to do the automated connections between all of those things in that hardware. And then eventually the goal is to make it available so that when we're not doing office hours, there's no reason for it to sit there for 20 hours a day. So if people want to run shows out of it, they can. Again, someday this is all going to be in the cloud. If you look at the test that I did this morning with HDR, it's why this system will be designed to run at a very, very high level. I mean, we're just being very competitive. So the system will be designed to run at 4K HDR with immersive sound. And so, again, the idea is that a lot of us will have that capability relatively quickly once that happens. Next question.
Chris Earl in Maitland, Florida is up next. I've heard a gaming podcast stream yesterday that obviously had transitioned to home, and they mentioned Parsec. I've not had a chance to dive into what that is exactly. Can anyone on the panel give me an elevator style pitch and practical use cases for that?
Guy Cochran.
Beiju. Yeah,
Beiju didn't.
Chirik actually uses it a lot more than I do. I like Teradici because it's been solid for me, and I like the multiple monitor functionality, but it does cost more. But Parsec basically allows you to control a system remotely, and you can have other people do it, and you can have other people log into the same session. That's what's really cool about it, and it's cheap unless you go for some of their pro plans, which allow for more color depth. So that's what I'm in love with Teradici. So it's basically like remote access is free. There's Team Viewer is another example, but it has limited color. So it's basically just a remote desktop style manager, and it just depends on what kind of quality and frame rate that you want and what you're willing to pay for.
Go ahead, Beiju.
So basically, as Guy said, it's a low latency, high quality remote access software. It can only be hosted on a PC, so it doesn't support Mac as a host. But if you have a PC you want remote access to, you can access it from a Mac or a PC. If you're coming from a PC, you can also do USB pass-through as well. If you get the paid plans, you can get multi-display as well as 444 color, which is one of the interesting things you can get with it as well. They have a Teams option as well. The nice thing is it's pretty simple to use. Free. If you just do single display, it's free. They don't care about if you want to do more than one display, you pay for it. It's pretty reasonable for that. And if you get it to work, the only challenge with it sometimes is that if you have complex networks you have to traverse, then it can have issues sometimes. If you get basically double NATs on both ends, it can get confused. Similar to what happens with, what do we call it? Sorry, I'm getting a brain right now. But basically, if you have any issues with something like that, but otherwise it does work very well. We use it for production pretty regularly as well. And as Guy mentioned, and as Chirag uses it pretty regularly, you can have multiple people logged into the same machine using Parsec, unlike Teradici, and you can restrict what the other people can do. They can either just watch the screen or you can give them keyboard and mouse commands as you need it.
Aaron and Leland, but real quick, we're going to move on.
I just had a question. What about just using RDP? Is that why do people use one over Parsec or Teradici over RDP instead of RDP?
If you log in via RDP, it locks the other user's display off sometimes, and when you log out of RDP, it can close the display. Parsec basically jumps over whatever admin account you have on it. So you can keep it logged in as it is.
Go ahead, Leland, real quick.
Yeah, just as a quick demonstration, that's what I had on the screen a moment ago. I use Parsec between two machines to do an instant connect so that I have access to the other computer immediately off of the first. The one thing you have to consider when you use Parsec, which has a simple control menu to just run through, switch displays on the other machine, change resolutions or bandwidth between the machines. You can disconnect at any time. The big thing is wherever you pop this display up from is the monitor that it's going to lock into, and that's where your other computer is going to show up. So you do have to watch where you open that application when you start it.
That's great. Next question.
Michael Marsh of San Anselmo, California says, first hour, when connecting VPN, Sidecar loses connection with iPad monitor. Is this a security feature or is there a workaround to keep the connection?
Go ahead, Aaron.
You need to tell your VPN to ignore your local network or to not proxy your local network. What's happening is your VPN is taking over the network connection completely, and you can't even see your local network anymore.
Next question.
Sidecar doesn't work.
Yep. Next question.
John M. Gerard in Berkeley, California. Thank you all. I think I'm getting the MV7 mic. Does this mic have a built-in pop filter?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
No. And it has a windscreen, and there is a difference between the windscreen and the pop filter. The pop filter, as you can see with mine, has to be a small distance away from the microphone for it to be effective. A windscreen is basically just that. It's blocking the wind coming in. It can work as a pop filter, but there is difference between the two.
I very rarely, with the MVs and the SM7Bs and Vs, I very rarely see anyone use a pop filter with it. So if it's in a proper location, you shouldn't need to have that. Go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say, placing the mic to this corner of the mouth where your plosives are going this way and the mic is here.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey's doing it too. He probably could have get away without using that pop filter if he wanted to, but and he knows that. But yeah, that's the placement instead of being like here, pop, you know, and just being over here instead. So
yeah, Bill, real quick.
Pop filters are generally paired with condenser mics that are very sensitive. Dynamics, which are most of these are, generally don't need them.
Next question. Oh, go ahead, Mac.
Yeah, just the distance is the issue with the pop filter, and on the SM7B and on the USB version of it, the actual mic element is way deep inside that foam screen. So the distance is actually there, and it does work pretty well as a pop filter.
That's great. Next question.
Moving on to Gordon Lake of Los Angeles, California, says, today Unreal did a presentation for broadcast and live events. In the Q&A afterwards, they mentioned looking at 2110, but didn't sound like the near future for that. Is 2110 a heavy lift for Unreal?
For everyone, it's just been something new. It is a heavy lift. I mean, it's a lot more data. So if you're dealing with, if you're typically dealing with NDI is very light. Compared to it, it's much more compressed than 2110 or potentially. So it's a new thing, and the issue is right now it's only being done in large facilities, but there's a lot of large facilities. I mean, basically every major facility that's getting built right now is getting built on 2110. They're not going to build something that they plan to use for the next 10 years on copper. So we're definitely seeing it slowly roll into the mainstream, but it'll still take another couple of years. Go ahead, Aaron.
For those who don't know, 2110 is spec'd as I mean, it doesn't have to be, but the current spec is uncompressed or lightly compressed with TICO video over at least 10 gigabit Ethernet. Most people are doing 25 or 100 gigabit Ethernet. So
it's like
it's a big lift.
it's the grown-up version of NDI. So anyway, next question.
Douglas Carmichael, Roland video products seem to be very popular in the event market. Have you ever had a client perception issue when using Roland equipment on site versus video-centric vendors like Blackmagic and so forth? For example, they might think Roland's a musical instrument company. Why are you using that for professional other
Karl.
stuff?
So rental houses will carry Roland equipment.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it has to do with margin. So there's just not a lot of the price and so on and so forth. Blackmagic has a couple problems with it. One is that it doesn't handle rough handling as well as a lot of these other devices. And secondly, there's not a lot of margin, so that integrators tend not to like it because they don't make much money on it. And then, so it's a really good ownership model, but not as good a rental model or a sell model if you're trying to sell it from an integrated perspective. For a long time when we were using Blackmagic, it was a hard sell. We had exactly the same problem. Clients would look at us and the entire event company or broadcaster would say, oh, that's just Blackmagic stuff. It's not going to work. There was some point where Blackmagic turned that corner, but it was 5 or 6 or 7 years. The bottom line is that if you produce great content and you don't tell your client that you've got a bunch of limitations, you find ways to do whatever they want to do. They're not going to care in the end. How you do it, as long as it's stable and it happens all the time. So I think that you can definitely bring a Roland in, but you just have to really, with anything, you have to really know it, to make sure that you're taking full advantage of it. Go ahead, Chris, and then Guy.
Yeah, I was going to say in the early 90s, I used to travel around the Bay Area with a 4-input video toaster and switch shows. People thought I was crazy, and I was like, it's okay. I'll take your money anyway.
Yeah. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I think there's been like a negative perception of Blackmagic versus Roland, but I do see a lot of Roland out in MI and at events just because they have built-in scalers. And in the olden days, there was a lot of like DVD players and just conversions, and these inputs on like the V440 would have this scaler built in, which you would have to get a bunch of outboard boxes with Blackmagic stuff. So I think a lot of the rental places and just these venues would have this stuff because they never knew what was going to be thrown at the projector, and they could hook up 2 projectors and have all this scaling. And so I think it just kind of won in that market. And again, it's also ease of use, like no software, you just plug it in and it just works. Whereas Blackmagic, a lot of time you got to, firmware update something. And with the Roland stuff, it's just solid. It just works every time.
Yeah. And if you want to just turn it on and just hit the buttons, that is a huge value for a lot of people, is just to be able to turn it on and just have it do the thing that it's supposed to do. And be able to totally control it self-contained. I do miss that at times with the Blackmagic stuff. But what you can do, you don't need to have the software interact with the Blackmagic as soon as it's set up, but it is hard to configure without it. So that is an advantage that Roland has, especially for smaller locations. Again, because we take advantage of a lot of the extensibility of the Blackmagic stuff. It's hard to look at almost anything else because of the open API. But for folks that aren't going to do that, they're just going to have folks that are not paying a ton to work in a bar or a smaller location and just need it to do the thing. It's a pretty good solution. Next question.
John M. Gerard in Berkeley, California says, I got the Logitech Brio for my brother. Does Logitech have an app for the PC to control the frame rate, white balance, etc.?
They have their own software that does that. You can download it from their website. It's not great, but it works, kind of. Next question.
Last one comes from Chris Fenwick. And Chris says, is it possible to have a StreamDeck attached to a machine to be able to control another machine? So StreamDeck Inception, asking for a friend.
Go ahead, Jeffrey, real quick.
Yeah, it's a program. It looks like Visceral, but it's pronounced Fekaro or something like that. And it's a listener. So it opens up a port and listens. The only downfall to it that I haven't been able to get past is you have to usually remote control into that other machine so it will work.
Go ahead, Baishu.
Yeah, 2 options. One, you can obviously use Companion. So you can have StreamDeck connected to Companion on that machine and forward packets to the other machine you want to control. Other option is there is a USB forwarded program you can install on your system as well that will forward the USB to the other machine. So that would directly be controlling as if it was connected locally to that system.
And now we're going to shift gears. So it's 8:00 and we're shifting to the second hour, and it's a pleasure to reintroduce to everyone to Todd Reynolds. When we scheduled this, I think we talked about it earlier. Todd was brand new, and he hadn't been on the show, and people were like, "We got to figure out what Todd's doing. We got to get Todd Reynolds on," because so I got all these little pings of let's get Todd Reynolds on. Now Todd's been here, so it's a funny place to be to bring it back. But I think that it opened up a thought process, as I said before, that we're going to do this with a lot of folks on the panel, slowly winding through it, and I think that Todd is going to be a great first person to bring on and to get introduced to. Todd, first of all, how did you find out about office hours since you're here? And then we'll jump into how you got to where you are.
Well, I think the first step is that back in the day when MacBreak Weekly and Screensavers and Call for Help was just starting, that's when I first got introduced to you. And then I kind of got mad at Apple planned obsolescence, and I went kind of with the Windows directions for a while. I stopped listening to podcasts, and then pandemic happened, and then I did all this learning about cameras and streaming myself, and then Chris Comfort and Jonas Dattel and and John Barker and Aaron Parecki all of a sudden made me aware that office hours was a thing that was very hard to get into. So I approached the jailer. I asked him directly for the key, and I got in, the jailer, Chris Comfort. And so Chris kind of ushered me in, and then I found myself here and realized I didn't have to do all this work myself for a year. I could have done it with all of you.
Now,
So,
and if you have
it.
questions as we start to move forward, go ahead and ask. Put them into Mukana. Todd, tell us a little bit about what you do and then how you got there.
I got there. I'm going to try to make this as short as possible. I mean, an hour goes so quickly in these situations. It all begins at Daniel Freeman Hospital in Inglewood, California, which is no longer there. And my father was just he saw my hands, I guess, and he said this kid's going to be a violinist. So
really, did he really look at that and just decide you're a violinist? Was he a violinist?
No, he's a pianist, and I think he just wanted somebody to play with. Right. Because my mom was not a musician in any way. So he was a pianist and a church organist, choir director, and 94 years old, still alive to this day in Palm Desert, California. Plays a concert every week for all the folks in the facility. So anyway, that happened. Let's just fast forward. You're gonna hear a lot of me paying respect and props to my teachers and mentors and bosses. But I mentioned the other day in one of our calls that I studied with Zubin Mehta's father, Meli Mehta, and his American Youth Orchestra in Westwood, California, out of UCLA, taught me how to sight read. And it gave me a lot of my early skill. And Meli Mehta gave me all of my repertoire. So the repertoire that us young violinists play, he gave all that to me in a very Cottable style. Galamian was a teacher out of Juilliard, and it was that style. So I did that. And then I had the enormous privilege to study with this great man. Some people know this guy, some people don't. I usually share the black and white photos because I think they are beautiful. He made movies too back in the day. He was the greatest violinist that ever lived in my estimation. I got to study with him for 3 years. His name is Jascha Heifetz. So I did that, put away the violin for like 2 years. I was playing like what is now a $250,000 violin. I put it in the closet for a couple of years, and I studied choral conducting. And then I got very interested when I went to school at Eastman in Rochester. I fell in with the bad crowd, like immediately, composers. And I started, I began to realize, and this, I know that's funny, but this is serious. I began to realize that in classical music, although I loved all the music of the past, everybody's dead. And it's just not as much fun to play dead people's music, even if they are rolling over in their grave. It's just not as much fun. So I started to work with real live composers. And that became my life. And that has been my life for 30 years. I guess the next place to fast forward is this guy here. This is not this guy. It's actually this guy. This is Steve Reich, a New York composer. You'll hear his name in the names right along Philip Glass, Terry Riley. Steve Reich is kind of, in some ways, the reason that the techno exists. Here we are he was my boss. It still is my boss, but we don't travel anymore. So Steve, this is the quartet out of the bigger ensemble. I think maybe it's at Carnegie Hall or at BAM. I forget where. But I was with him for 20 years and played his operas. And of course, his music is all over my music. It's pattern-based. It's cyclical. And he was the one who began to work with tape loops back in the day. it was him and Terry and all those guys. They were stretching 1/8-inch tape like all over the room. So that's kind of, yeah. So sorry. Oh yeah. Come Out to Show Them is a piece. Everybody can find that on Spotify, and It's Gonna Rain. It's fabulous music. So anyway, Steve is my boss and always was my boss. Part of the lineage of Steve Reich and Terry Riley and Philip Glass, you'd call that the minimal tradition in classical music. And the group with whom I'm most closely associated is a group called Bang on a Can out of New York. I've been the violinist for that group of folks it's 3 composers out of Yale that started that 30 years ago. And so we have up here where I live in North Adams, Massachusetts, we have a summer program. So that brings us to that part of it. But the real story, and I'll make this quick too, is I took time in my third year of Eastman. I kind of on a whim, on a dare, I auditioned for principal second violin of the Rochester Philharmonic. And on a whim, I got the position. So I played in that position for 3 years, which was kind of a dissonance because my heart was in this kind of revolutionary, almost evangelical, ideas about music. And yet I was playing in an orchestra gig, But I did it. I loved it. It was a fantastic time. After that, Eastman School of Music wouldn't give me my degree. I guess I hadn't earned it through my experience, but I needed to pay more money, do more residency, do a few more classes. So I called up SUNY at Stony Brook, State University of New York at Stony Brook, which was kind of a new music institution. They gladly took me in. I came in, I was all muddy and gross, and from my position. And I just went back to school to study again. And it's there that I started to play rock and roll and jazz. There was a jazz club nearby. And also the most important thing, a wonderful professor named Dan Weymouth, who'd just been hired to build a computer music studio there, gave my best friend and myself, Michael Lowenstern.
Now, what year was this?
This is 1990. Michael Lowenstern, great, phenomenal bass clarinetist with a great YouTube channel. Michael and I got handed the keys to the kingdom. We basically got handed the keys to Studio C with a Mac SE, with a TG-77, with an SY-77. Somewhere around out there, there's this really bad tape that I never ever want to hear again of me singing Louie Louie to Michael's electronic realization. This was the first time that we got the floppy disks for Studio Vision, for Opcodes Max. We just basically were in there till 4 a.m. every day. We had a great master's degree program together, and that's what got me on this road.
So what did you do for the last 30 years?
So the last 30 years. So it took me probably 10 years to come out as a composer. Here I had been playing all of this incredible music, all the great Western European avant-garde that comes over from Europe. And I finally, during my master's degree, I realized that American music was black music. And the things that made my heart sing were all from Africa. They were all from the Deep South. They were all from jazz and rock and roll. It's like I got out of my hips and into my head. I know that's a song. And no, out of my head and into my hips. There we go. I went backwards. And that's kind of where I started to really play groove music. And the first thing that I did was at Stony Brook. I said, today I will learn to improvise, which is really, I don't recommend this to anybody to go about it this way. And so I went into a classroom. I said, damn it, excuse me, clean show. I'm going to improvise. And I picked up my fiddle. Hold on. I'll pick up my fiddle. Just like that, I'll reenact this for you. Okay. So anyway, I picked up my fiddle, and I said, today is the day I will learn to improvise. So I said, well, you got to start somewhere. And I started somewhere, and I played a note, and I'm like, a D. Everybody starts with a D. It's good, and I was very, very, the self-consciousness that we carry as humans is amplified by the musical pursuit and any hard-earned pursuit. And so eventually I learned that one of the nicest things that I would be able to do for myself was to plug myself in. And when I did that, I could play into a gigantic reverb, or better yet, I could play into a digital delay. And then in playing into a digital delay, it would come back to me. And I could play along with myself. And when I heard something back, it was so much more familiar to what I'd grown up with in playing with other people. And so that gave me a lot more ease on my entry into improvisation. Once you get to improvisation, then you very easily, eventually, get to composition. Because, our greatest composers, Johann Sebastian Bach, I tell my classes this all the time, first composer who was an improviser and electronic musician. And after your head wrestles with that just a minute, what I really mean is, play a sound on a keyboard and the sound comes out way over there. So he was kind of the first MIDI instrumentalist in terms of his organ playing. So but Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, they were all players. They were all improvisers, and they wrote it down. So I have one record of music that is, generated in a lot of different ways, some of which I'll show you today, and also some that it's like very written out, and then written out music from my friends who wrote for a guy that they know who improvises, so the way that they approach that particular piece might or might not have been different, than the way that they usually write. So I play both written and unwritten music. I have specialized over my career in playing music, in realizing new music by composers, and I still do that, and I still love it. And by the same token, I've grown to a place where I really know what my music is like and what my happy place is like. And my happiest place is starting from nothing and making something and then pressing delete at the end. And it's as you, so I think you and I share a lot of resonation around Buddhist thought and culture from the East, and that's part of it. Beginner's mind is kind of where I love to sit, where I love to be, and so that's kind of the real ground base on top of which anything I do flows.
It's amazing. Do you want to play us anything?
Oh, sure. I mean, if you want to hear, I
yeah.
thought what I thought I would do today is maybe show. Because I know Victor had a lot of interest in looping, and I think a lot of people, this is kind of one really great entry level into electronics, into improvisation. So I thought what I would do is I'd start by just kind of bringing up a looper. This is my drug of choice. I'm unabashed in saying that Ableton Live is probably the best thing to happen to music in like forever. I'm a Pro Tools user, I'm a Logic user, I'm a Reaper user, I'm an everything user, and Ableton Live, when it happened, version 2.0 was when I got in, and it changed my life. And the reason it changed my life was that I was trying to write down music and not being successful. And this piece of software, which you'll understand why I say this in a bit, this piece of software allowed me to write music, hear music, capture music in real time quickly, and that's why I love it. So I can't say enough about it. Any questions about Ableton, I will be answering. And a few years ago, Ableton and Cycling74.com, who writes Max MSP and Jitter, they got married and they had a baby. And so that baby is a program called Max for Live, which is embedded now, completely integrated into the core of Ableton Live. So anyway, let me bring this up. I'm going to show you a few things here. Let me get you a 4 up really quickly so that you can. There we go. So so this piece right here is the Ableton Push. This is one of the first really super integrated pieces of hardware. Most hardware manufacturers try to make hardware that will work for all DAWs. This is made by Ableton to interface bidirectionally with their software flawlessly. So I can just press right here, and you'll see right there on the bottom, blank black screen. This is a looper. So what I'm going to first do is take this out of quantization mode. The one thing that makes Ableton Live, is that it runs on a clock. And this little menu that I just opened up here on the bottom, maybe I should go back here to something where you can see it a little bit better. There we go. This menu that you're seeing is a quantization menu, so that all actions that you take happen at the level of this quantization. So right now I'm going to set it to none so that it's not listening to the clock. So I'm just going to loop into this looper, and the way it works is that I press a button on my foot pedal. I've shown you the soft step before, so you'll see that. So I push a button on the bottom pedal, and then that basically records immediately into this looper. So we'll just go note by note. It's really easy to do this way. Whoops. Actually, let me, I didn't do what I said I was going to do, so it's not exactly, let me do this. There we go. This will work a little bit better now. I can overdub into this. It turns blue. I just hit the second button on my pedal board. Kind of a rough loop, actually. It doesn't have a great seam, so I could go back and I could do it again, or you can just try to, you know, make some lemonade with your grapefruit. But let me turn the looping portion off, and then I'll show you some of the other things you can do. I just hit the play button, it went yellow again, and now I'm going to throw it down an octave, which also makes it half as fast. At the same time, I can press button 6 on the soft step, which I've now mapped to the reverse. And just to show you how ridiculous and stupid easy it is to run this program, there's a little button right up here at the top that says MIDI, and there's one that says key. So any of the functions inside of this program can be mapped like this, just with a finger snap. So even Command M puts us into MIDI mode, everything turns blue, and I just touch on something and then touch on a key on any MIDI controller, and it's instantly mapped to that. So another thing that makes it kind of easy to use. If I put it back into overdub and then turn down the feedback knob, it'll start feeding out pretty quickly. I can also change the pitch again. Then it goes away faster. So that's the very basics of looping in a digital delay format, right? So that's basically feedback oriented, where you put sound in, and if the feedback's at 100%, it's going to keep things in, and then every time you play into it, it lessens that by just 1%, so other things can enter in, and it doesn't get completely out of control. So that's one paradigm for looping. The other paradigm for looping is actually the whole basis of Ableton Live. And I think I should probably just touch on that for a moment. One second. And then, by the way, this is the first time ever I'm doing something and not keeping an eye on the chat, so I don't know what's going on.
No, just keep going.
Yeah. If anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, we're absorbing.
Right on. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this. So now you can kind of see Ableton's architecture. So right now the clock is running. There is no quantization. I'm going to actually put the quantization back on here to 1 bar, which means that anything will happen on the seam of the next bar. And let me get you up here on this so you can see it a little bit better. There we go. So what you're seeing here, well, that's not so great either. Hold on. We'll get it. Here it is. Okay. So what you see is a grid here. It looks very much like an Excel spreadsheet or numbers. And so each one of these little squares can be considered a container for audio or MIDI, note information. So you could put an instrument on any track and then put a MIDI clip, which looks like a piano roll, and play that, show you that. And then most of these, however, are actual audio files that I recorded in real time during a stream last December when I streamed every day for 31 days. So all of this material was generated there. So it's kind of fun always for me to observe it, to go back and look at it. This Violin Live track right here is me coming in. Sorry for the Discord. And I hope you didn't hear that. Are you hearing my alerts?
Did not hear.
No? Okay, good, excellent. So this is my violin track, and you'll see that it's going through a bunch of effects down at the bottom, one of which is that looper. And these next tracks are being fed by that live violin input track. So if I want to record something into it, all I've got to do is click a record button right here. Let me do that for you. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the metronome so you can really hear how this works. Now that may be annoying. I'll turn it down just a tiny bit. It'll be less annoying if I play though. Okay, so I'm going to basically record. You'll see it flash, and then I can record on the next measure. And then when I click the button again, then you will see the thing all of a sudden play back. There we go. So I can click in the middle of the bar, and I'll do it like this. 1, click, 3, 4. It's kind of soft. Let's get it up. So you can see that just very easily I can make some material. If I want to go to the next one to the right, that's not hard either. I'll just use my push to navigate down there. And then if I press this button or I press a button on my pedal, 1 click, already panned, you know. Want to go to the next one? That one has some delay on it. Here, I'll grab my bow so you know that I can actually use my bow. You can see music gets made super quickly. Yeah.
I mean,
thank
amazing.
you for that. Thank you for that. Yeah. So that's that. And then other really nice things like, you know, all of this because it's synced to a metronome, which I'll now turn off because it's once again annoying. Let's do this. Let's throw in maybe a little shaker. And then if you can see over here, I have this wonderful MIDI fighter twister, one of my favorite little MIDI controllers. So if I go to a heavier drum beat, I can basically grab a piece, even change the time at which it captures. All sorts of stuff. I mean, it's just like, as a performance tool, it is kind of unmatched. So that's the first Ableton Live demonstration. And what I haven't shown you, which is the best ever, is that if I actually clicked the actual master record button at the very top, it would have recorded every motion that I've made, every audio file that I've played or recorded with my violin straight in here in your usual normal old timeline view, like any other DAW. So that's my Ableton Live spiel of like why it is why I always say that my instrument is this 18th century instrument paired with 21st century technology. So that's where I like to live. It feels really present day, feels really great, and I really enjoy it. So, yeah,
it's amazing. Yeah, and like magical. You know, and the thing is that I think a lot of times we think about performance and just watching someone create it. I think that's what's interesting about it is the actual experiencing the creation process of watching it get layered on top of, you know, and things put together. I think sometimes. It's the same thing that we noticed with cooking, you know, with cooking together, is that what we really liked was just the process of that. But watching someone who really has this incredible talent, you know, that stacks all those things together. And what I love about what you're doing is you're taking instruments that are hundreds of years old and mixing them with the absolute cutting edge of what's being done right now, and creating music out of it. Not like cacophony, but actual, I would listen to that all day. like what you just created is just like this background of, and it's just an amazing thing. Go ahead, Leland, real quick, and then we'll jump to some questions.
Yeah, as one who received Ableton Live Lite with my APC 40, I've been playing around with it a little bit. I just have to ask you, Todd, after watching you work with us on the remotes, do you teach any classes at all on Ableton, or is that something that's, maybe in your future?
So I have the great honor of teaching at one of the great conservatories of the world, Manhattan School of Music in New York City. And I teach in a special program there, which is for contemporary musicians. It's a master's degree, about 14 students usually. So I teach Ableton Live for a semester. I teach Max MSP for a semester, all intro stuff. And then the next year, I try, now especially, we're going to try to do content creation and live concerts. That's why I have them build sound systems and take them down every week, so they can kind of function in our world. In terms of private things, Leland, my partner Isabel, who will probably type into Mukana at some point, we have a venture called Amplify This, which is an educational portal, an online educational portal that we started during COVID. And part of that is, I haven't actually made my Ableton Live to 360 course yet, but we, there is more Ableton always in my future. I love teaching it. As you can tell, I'm just this much passionate about it. So yeah, always in my future. And I'm happy to teach for anybody too. It's like anybody who needs some Ableton joy in their life, make a class. I show up.
Let's talk about labs.
Yeah, exactly.
Not too
exactly.
There's a lab
we haven't
in our
even
future.
gotten,
I can tell you right now. We
haven't even gotten to Max yet, which is a whole other thing.
Are you going to show us some Max today?
I will be happy to show you a patch that I teach my students. It's a mess, but I'm happy to show it to you if you would like.
Yeah. Let's answer a couple questions and then we'll have you show that to us. So if you're in the panel, ask the questions in Mukana. Let's go ahead and jump to the questions.
Sure. Actually, our first two, or the two highest rated, come from Victor, and they really talk about some of the things that has already been discussed here. Victor started out with, can you talk about how to use Ableton in both your live and recording workflow? And I think you've covered that reasonably, but we'll ask Victor if he has any additions to this. And can you discuss the equipment you use for looping regarding your workflow there? I think you've touched on that. But Victor, is there anything specific you want to amplify for that?
On the second one, really, the first one was more than well covered. But I'd like to know a little bit more about your pedal board setup, because I think I saw some other effects there, including a reverb delay and some stuff. So a little bit more detail on that would be welcomed.
Sure. Yeah. Let me get that particular camera up here. I'm trying to get faster at, I got to tell you guys, David Joshua Ford's companion profile for the StreamDeck and Adam Tao's mix effect have been I spent the last 2 days doing that instead of cleaning my studio for you. So I apologize. My floor is a mess. I didn't vacuum, but let's get this one up. Where is it? It is the wide shot. Where's the wide shot? It is. You just got me a little nervous. There we go. That's the wide shot. So let's look at this then, Victor. The at the bottom is here. Wait a second. I have a pointer around here somewhere. Here it is. Found my pointer. Okay. So this is the soft step, right? And the soft step is by Keith McMillan Instruments. It is lightweight. You can run over it with a truck, and it basically solves many problems. It sends all the MIDI commands that you would want that are toggle or on and off or whatever, and it also sends pressure. So you can actually step down on it and release to go from 0 to 127. For everybody who doesn't recognize those numbers, that's the MIDI specification. Numbers from 0 to 127 are what you are moving whenever you turn a knob or a slider on a MIDI controller. And then the pedal board itself is kind of white bread in a way. This is my pickup, this Schertler pickup over here for my violin. I'm going direct into that. A Chase Bliss Condor for preamperage, a wonderful, wonderful company. Chase Bliss makes some of the best pedals out there. Strymon Timeline for one delay that I love, which is a reverse delay. And then the multi-tool of all multi-tools, Eventide H9, which also carries the old reverbs that I used to love. I actually have not an H3000 but an Orville over here. So I've been a fan and a lover of Eventide's warmth forever. So that's my pedal board, Victor. Yeah, go ahead, Victor.
Victor.
Just if I don't know if you're going to touch on that beautiful modular synth that I saw to you right there somewhere along the way. That would be fun too.
I would be happy. I mean, if we get 4 questions about the modular synth, I would love to dive into that. But if Alex wants to go to Max first, we might.
No, let's. Well, the modular synth I think is probably well, let's answer a couple more questions, then we'll have you show us Max. We'll come back to more questions. The questions are now stacking up. Next question.
Cool.
Absolutely. Aaron Husledge is next from Durham, North Carolina, and he says, "Do you think minimalism and improvisation are more accepted in the classical music world today than they were?"
Oh God, yes. Oh God, yes. I mean, it doesn't. It's yeah. It's kind of funny to think about that, because every move. Well, not every movement, but movements often can experience resistance. Once Philip Glass started, making movie soundtracks, Philip Glass became ubiquitous. By the way, a nicer, kinder, broader man, I don't think you can find. He's wonderful. And so his music became ubiquitous. We heard it in The Hours. We heard it in so many movie soundtracks. Steve Reich, I mean, Steve Reich has done when we used to go out with the band, it was a big ensemble. Steve Reich's music is so specific and very intellectual and classical in a way. And it's Cuckoo, stop. He doesn't like that I'm on TV. This is my dog. You can't see him. Anyway, Steve's music, in its cellularity, and also in its ease of listening. It's like, Philip Glass can put you in a zone. Steve Reich can too. But for me, the rhythmic interest in it comes from Ewe drumming, and it comes from gamelan, from Indonesian gamelan. These were the musics that he studied as he was coming up. And in fact, he and Phil used to, they both drove cabs, and I think had a moving company or something when they were young in New York City, and they both worked together, and then they kind of went their separate ways. But Aaron, the minimalism thing is inherent in electronic music. It's like I almost want to say without Steve Reich there's no electronic music, which is fallacious to say. It's not true. But when you think of techno, when you think of all those musics that are based upon grooves that repeat over and over and over and develop in a very subtle way, I think it's got to have started with those tape loop experimentations.
Absolutely
back then.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Next question.
Carl Asmussen says, "Can you speak to your journey into Eurorack?"
I stayed away for a long time. I tried to stay away for a long time. I kind of looked at it. I'm not one of those musicians that had a lot of access to synthesizers until, like I said, my master's degree, where there was Yamaha stuff, which was all inside the box, and it was paging through screen. It wasn't anything. But I did know Bob Moog. I did buy a theremin. I do own a theremin. And I began about 5 or 6 years ago to really start getting pulled in. And so my journey into Eurorack, let's see, who can I blame for this? I can tell you who I can blame. In New York, there's a fabulous store, small, called Control Mod in Brooklyn. And they were helping to sponsor a synth event in whatever that place is that I forget right now in Brooklyn. Anyway, so I went to that, and I met Tony Rolando, who is with Make Noise, and fabulous units. And I heard this in my face, and it blew my mind. And that's where it started, right there. And then I saved up for a long time. I started to buy stuff bit by bit. I bought a case, and I made one. And then I bought this big Make Noise shared system for the school, for Manhattan School. I keep the machine during the summer so I can work with it and get to know it as I want to teach it next year. And so that was that. I just kind of got sucked into Eurorack. And then my friend Brian Crabtree, who is the inventor and company owner of the Monome, MONOME. That's monome.org. Brian started to make grids and arcs. They are instruments unto themselves, but they kind of, at least for me, they take a little programming degree to kind of figure out, how to really program with them. I'm not the best programmer, but then he started to make synth modules, which were controllers. So that's my sequencer. So I got pulled into that, Karl, and it's the thing about modular, and I guess we can go anytime you want into
show us,
modular.
show us some modular.
Sure. Let me get that camera. That would be this one. There we go. Okay, so we'll take a look at this. Maybe I'll even take this camera off. The problem is my microphone doesn't go very far.
And for our viewers, I can tell you right now, or our producers, we're not going to get to all the questions, and so it's really important to vote on those questions as we do it, because we would definitely want to get some of this performance. We've got a couple of them stacking up, so focus on the voting. Go ahead.
All right, so I'm gonna. This is all the Ableton stuff going on that we had going before. I'm gonna turn those clips off. They just end on a dime. Now this happens to be the modular synth. There's so many wires, obviously, that you can't see anything. So I'm going to take the camera off and get as close as I can and kind of explore a few things with you. Pardon my non-gimbal jitteriness. So this is the Monome, as we mentioned. Now this is my synth. This is one that I built. Now in synthesis, the basic principle, and I'm just going to do this really quickly for the uninitiated. We're really talking about electronic production of waveforms, and then the alteration, pitch-wise, filter-wise, timbre-wise, volume-wise, of those particular oscillators. That's that in its most basic form. So first of all, you'll hear a kick drum in the back, in the bottom. I actually have 2 channels going now. I'm going to get rid of that one. So now we've got 2 synthesizers that are going now. I'm going to make it a little bit simpler and focus right on this one and turn this one off. So now you hear pitches moving. You can see some tempo there. Let's see what else you can see. You can see tempo actually coming in from Ableton Live, because Ableton Live, its clock, its metronome, is governing how this behaves and how the pitches get triggered. And yet this is the controller, right? So what you'll see right here on the top row is what you're hearing right now in terms of when notes get triggered. There are 4 channels that you can work with here. That's the kick drum, and this is what you're hearing now. These are those channels. And then here are the pitches for the first channel, this one. So if I want to change this rhythm, I can put more notes in it or take out notes. And then I can change the pitches. I can also change the registers of those pitches. Here are all of them in the same register. A few registers above. And you can hear it when they trigger. You can really see it and hear it. One of the reasons I love this Monome. Here's the scale that I'm playing with. I can change the scale really easily. The way that Brian Crabtree thinks about music and about making music is crazy for me. It's beautiful, and it's not like anything I know, and it causes me to learn. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm just going to sweep a couple of dials, and you won't be able to hear my voice because I'll be away from the mic, but I'm going to change this timbre a little bit and figure out how things work. So there's some of it. Did you see at least enough to get you started?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, there's a whole like Saturday that we could just sit here and just watch the process. It's amazing.
And then when you start to get into, putting the fiddle through that, right? Because
right.
The other thing about modular synthesis, and this goes back to what we were talking about, Karl. The other thing about modular synthesis that meant something to me was this idea of tactileness. Being in the electronic music world and using Ableton Live, I cannot tell you the times that I've done entire concerts of like an hour and made up the music from one note that I started with no preconceptions, and had somebody come up and say, "Were you playing with tracks?" And so, when we play with laptops, you might as well be checking your email. So there is this move, and that's why you see Dead Mouse and Beardy Man and everybody else. It's like everybody's kind of, the aesthetic in electronic music and the performance of it is, do not touch that computer. You might have controllers or whatever, but let's not touch the laptop. So the modular synth goes one more step for me, because I just touch a knob. And not only does the timbre change, but everything changes. Other voices pop out. And the thing is, it's all straight ahead electricity. There's very little in this machine that I just was playing that's digital. You can't save anything. You turn this thing off and it's done. You start over. You start over, like tuning your synth so that it's playing in the same scale that you want to play with your acoustic instrument, in the way that I use it, at least.
Right. Next question.
So I reprioritized, and now we're at the top of the vote list, and TJ Asher has the most upvoted questions. He says, can we get a second hour by Todd on how he did the presentation with multiple screens and sources? Awesome.
So this is the you have an ATEM Extreme?
Yes, thanks to you. Yeah, I do. What happened was, I'm sorry, this camera's bothering me. So what happened was that all through this pandemic, TJ, I have been struggling with one laptop. I started out with Ecamm Live. It was my primary thing. Then I tried to do OBS. And, whenever you do video and audio, everybody knows things crap out really, sorry, clean show. They go away really quickly. And so I got artifacts and all sorts of stuff. And I've been wanting, and so my dear partner Isabel, we have a budget to increase the studio, so it was time. So I got that M1 because Alex said, please come do a second hour. At the same time, when I began to see what was possible with the Extreme and SuperSource and everything else, and once again, John Barker, Aaron Parecki, it's like these folks are the people who I was watching before you guys, and I all of it, and then with you guys, it was like there was a no-brainer. I got to move up now, so I got it. I don't have a Blackmagic camera on my foot pedals. I wish I did. But yeah, so I basically, over the past 2 days, David Joshua Ford let me beta test his config file for the Extreme, and it's awesome. It's great. And then I bought the mix effect, and it's basically those two, and it's really four changes. And thank God I have these cameras and these two computers, so now I can do my Zoom call on one, any visuals on one, and then any audio on the other. So that's how I did it, TJ. Pretty simple, though.
That's great. Next question.
Ranjan Chandil from Los Angeles is up next with connecting all the module units into Ableton seems daunting. What's the best way to understand a simplified audio chain?
Okay, that's super. Well, it's actually a little bit more simple than one might think. I mean, this is not going to make it any better if I show this, so I probably shouldn't show it. But I'll say this: I use an RME. Let me get to SuperSource.
So really, it's just that out of the modular synth, it's just a couple channels, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is so simple. This is not necessary that I show this. This is not necessary at all. It's two channels out of the modular synth going into Ableton Live. It's actually being processed. It's got a little delay and reverb on it in Ableton Live. So that's number one. Number two, in Ableton's, this I can show, in Ableton's preferences, very easily, I'm not sure if you'll really be able to see this, but you can send sync out to anything. And I have sync going to an actual modular synth module, which receives it and then sends that sync out to be distributed. So the way that it's interacting and integrated with Ableton Live is simple, and the route is simple. If you're talking about the big nest of wires, however, there's no simplified chain for that. It's kind of like raising a child. It's messed up.
You gotta know it. Next question.
Comes from our own Chris Fenwick. And Chris says, when you create from scratch, do you see a movie in your head? When you did your Ableton demo, I immediately began to see a movie in my head.
Chris, so first of all, I'm honored. You know, so one of the things that has been great as a musician is when people come to you and say, you know, I shut my eyes and I saw X. That doesn't happen for me. So, I mean, not in the experiencing of music or in the delivering of music. I can say that when I start to play, there is a dropping down into something which isn't so mysterious. It's just kind of a dropping down into focus and listening for me. So whatever you're picking up in your visual thing, I don't think there's any direct line between anything, but it absolutely, what you're hearing is an intent of mine to make a curved line, to make a trajectory, just like it's everybody's hope here to make a trajectory of a show that makes sense. So it's that thing that's happening, and it's kind of happening in kind of more of a micro time base, because it's like happening every minute for me. And the more that I'm able to be focused, the better. And I'll say this one other thing, which is just totally personal to me. When I'm playing old music, like any music that's older than 2 years ago, that's been written, including Beethoven or whatever, my mind can wander. I have ADD like the rest of us, and my mind can wander. And when I'm doing this, my mind doesn't go anyplace, because it's fixated not only on tasks, but on being and on feeling. So in a way, this is a spiritual practice for me. And if that causes visualization on the other side, wow. And people with synesthesia, oh my God. You know, and so that's, yeah, thanks for that, Chris. That was awesome.
That's great. Next question.
What fabulous observations. Chris Ward is up next from Berlin. What are the main differences between Ableton versions, and can you recommend any good getting started tutorials for those of us used to linear editors?
Yes. So the difference between Ableton versions, I haven't, you know, because they do check stuff, change things over the years, and like what versions hold what. I think there's Live Lite, Live Standard, and then Live Suite. So Live Suite is, of course, the everything bundle. It's got everything in it you need. To tell you the honest to God truth, Chris, I do not know what Standard is coming with right now and what Live Lite is. I do know that there are instruments that are not included in either of those, or certain effects or things like that aren't included. It's made so that people can, of course, who want a low financial experience, can play with the thing. And of course, as with everything, the upgrade path is all. So I would say, and this is just my own philosophy, so I know we don't talk religion or politics here, but definitely save up and buy it once.
Right.
Buy once, cry once. Yeah.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, have you ever used the chance features in Live 11?
Have I used the chance features in Live 11? Yes, I have, and I wanted to make sure that Victor, who had his hands raised, also got noticed. But I have, but I don't use it a lot, kind of because, I mean, the stuff that is, you know what, to tell you the truth, I just haven't experimented with it yet. I've been too busy for what is for me 8 to 12 every day with this crew. So I haven't been making music as much as I want to. So I haven't, but I have a tiny bit, because when it first came out, when the beta came out, I delved into it. So I know what they do, and I think they're fabulous. And it really is another way of making your music not static.
Go, Victor.
Yeah, Apple's Logic finally brought the paradigm of Ableton into the foray because of the competition, and now they have the similar paradigm. Have you had time to play with that or work with that? Because I'm sure interested in following that up because it's included in the price.
Yes, I have absolutely looked at it and worked with it. In fact, that was the reason that I moved from High Sierra to Mojave, because somebody wanted me to teach it to them. So I had to learn it. And that's all I'm going to say about that, Victor.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next with how are you controlling the modular from Ableton? Do you use MIDI CV modules, or are you using a dedicated sequencer with a MIDI input?
Great. So what I'm actually not today, and in most of my work, I'm not sending pitch material to the modular at all. So what I'm at this point working with is the only thing that gets sent to the modular is clock. Because the thing that is most important for me is that things sync up together, because I like to make rhythmic music. So the clock goes there, but all the standalone sequencing that I'm doing is being done with this device, which is connected to Brian's Ansible. You'll see that if you go to monom.org, you'll see products called the Grid and Ansible, Ansible. And those two together are what are controlling my modular in terms of the notes that are played and the gates, the CV gates that are sent. That's totally it. I mean, the Ansible basically has 4 channels of pitch and gate information right next to each other. So I can take for those who are uninitiated in the modular world, the reason you see that nest of cables is that there are these tiny 1/8-inch cables that we basically put one activity to another activity to use electricity to modulate that the other destination. So that's what is being sent from that modular rack piece. Sorry, I'm terribly inarticulate when I talk about modular. Please go ahead.
Yeah, next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand, occasionally here on the panel, says, Todd, have you had a look at Sam Aaron's Sonic Pi code-based Python tool for live performance and recording? And he has a link there.
No, but I will be looking in the office chat and Discord for that link later on. So thank you, Peter.
That's great. Next question.
Aaron Husledge of Durham, North Carolina is next with how do you integrate Max MSP into your work?
I think it's a good chance for you to show it to us.
Boy, thank you for the transition, Aaron. Let's go here. I'll just I'll do this live for you, and it'll take just a moment to make it happen. But we'll leave live and go to Max. All right, Max. Where is Max? There's Max. So Max, just a quick little demo. I know we're like 5 minutes here left, but a quick thing to say about Max is that there's so many. Oh, here's the patch. Okay, we'll go right into it. This is. Oh, my desktop is so messy. Let me do this, at least. All right. So Max MSP is an object-oriented programming environment. This is the user interface mode called presentation mode. I wish.
And you build this, right? You like lay this out.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I wish Kalak was here because in his presentation the other day, I'm like, oh yeah, that's presentation mode. Oh yeah, that's the key object. Oh yeah, that's this and that. So so this is presentation mode. Like Isadora, you've got an edit mode, which I just threw it into. And if I take it out of presentation mode, this is what it actually looks like, right? So each one of these things is an object of some sort, some kind, or description. Now, for all of you that have headphones on right now, let me take it out of edit mode. One of the things that I'm not going to take time to really show you is that when I launched this patch, it took over my Ableton Push. My Ableton Push looks completely different right now. Doesn't look like Ableton. It has only like probably 12 buttons assigned to it. And one of which is to actually, here, I'll turn this on. One of them is to turn on my violin channels. And here, we should go to this. Does this give us what we want? Nope, this doesn't. I need 1, 2, 4. Here, I'll just go for the 4 up, and we'll see if you can't see enough there. So I just turned on my violin channels. Now I can turn on my microphone channel. And what you can't see is the soft step also got taken over, right? So I'll turn off the microphone channel because that's just annoying. Let me grab my fiddle. So this is what I teach my students to build every year. Just a quick run around this. The colored boxes are triggers for recording 7 different loops, capturing a different amount of them and playing them at different speeds. And then the toggles right underneath it are whether those things play or not. There is feedback at the bottom, lower right-hand corner. You'll see a circle. I'll show you that in a minute. There are presets, all of that. And yes, all of it is built from objects. So now we got this. All the sound you're hearing is from my pedal board, so don't worry about that. So now, even with my keyboard, I can press, what is this, the A key? And of course, I'm happy to give this to everyone. Once we get our Max chops together through whatever thing, I will be more than happy to give you this patch. But this A will record whatever I play. It'll record the left side. So watch what happens here. Right? So now I've got 3 different files playing. I'm going to use my actual foot pedal, which now you can't see, to press a key, which will, no, I'll just do it here. I'll just do an open string. I'm now using the S key, which I've assigned to it, to do these other ones. And one of them is 6 seconds long, so I have to play for a minute. Now, for all of you who have headphones in, let me do this. I'm just going to do this with the mouse. I'm going to turn this on. This is a plugin called ICST Ambisonics. And let's see if this can work nicely for you. Then the other thing I can do is I can actually have this stuff change speed, which is nice. Is it circling around your head? I'm really hoping that it's circling around your head. Thumbs up, thumbs down? Can you hear it enough or not?
I'm not hearing it circle, but I'm not sure how we have it set up. It's something that we could play with, though.
I mean, if you're hearing in stereo, if you have headphones on and you're listening in stereo, Brian has something to say. Is he
good?
Check original sound, Todd. From what I'm hearing,
I will turn it on and off and see what happens. How about now? No. You know, okay. Well, this is what is known in the industry as a fail. So I'm just gonna fade that out and let that go. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's the one thing I didn't test this morning was this patch. So I don't know why. It must be something about, if it's coming through stereo, I would think that you would hear.
Is your setting in your Zoom settings? Do you have stereo audio turned on?
Yes. Otherwise, I don't think you would have heard stereo. You all heard stereo in Ableton Live, right? Yeah.
No.
That sounded like.
No,
you didn't.
No, we didn't.
Everybody else did. Everybody else heard stereo. Oh, no? Okay.
We just heard great music.
Yeah, I would check high fidelity and stereo. Just toggle those on and off.
No, let's go look.
I heard.
Let me go look.
I heard all of the violin playing in stereo.
Okay.
Yeah, because my stuff is all pan. So if you don't hear it right away, yeah. So the idea that this is not coming to you in stereo though is kind of weird to me. But obviously it's something in the patch that is not working. I'm hearing it circle my head. I got to tell you, it is glorious. So so that's kind of all I can say about that. But yeah, so that's Max MSP, and I'm so happy to do a second hour on it and kind of intro it, because that's kind of where I'm qualified. So many people are great at Max, and I am not. I know just enough to hurt myself and others, but if you come protected with your armor, I can do nothing to defeat you.
I think that there's a couple second hours that we could do here. So I think that we'll keep talking about that. That's amazing. We are at the end of the hour. Todd, unbelievable. I mean, just unbelievable.
Thank
Just
you guys. It
so
has been
great to have you.
It's such a pleasure to have enjoyed your company for this many months now, and to have an opportunity to share with you what I do. So thank you so much, and to all the producers too. So happy to share with you.
I mean, yeah, just really, you know, and I have to admit that just seeing a little hint of what Todd was doing, and obviously hearing about what he was doing with the remotes and everything else, I didn't know, you know, what to expect. Like I was just kind of like, we're gonna have Todd on and we're gonna see how this goes. You know, and I, you know, usually there's like, I follow up with people, I talk to them about what they're gonna do, and I was like, I think it's gonna be great. Like I just think it's gonna be, you know, like I'm not worried about it, and it was amazing. So just really just, and I know how much work it was to put that together. It's not just like you just jumped on and talked to us, and we just really appreciate the effort and just an amazing hour. So thank you so much for your contribution.
You're so welcome. Pleasure to be here.
And we can't wait to do more labs. we're gonna pull you in like you know, it's just you know, I don't know how to play anything really well, and so for me it's all improvisation. You know, if I have a keyboard, if I have whatever, it's just whatever feels like it's a good song, but I don't know all these tools as well as you do, and so I'm really fascinated by it. So anyway,
There's one thing that I want to share with you before I go. It's especially for you, that I haven't had a chance to share with you yet. Were you and I in the same place at the same time?
we were not in 2014, but wow, have I been there many times. The coolest festival in the world, in my opinion. Like, I don't know if that was the experience for you.
It was awesome, and I just wish that I wish that I'd end up going back again and again. I went that one time, was fortunate to bring an Embera back, and I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that time.
Were you able to? Did you? Yeah. Did you meet Chuniza Morare, or was she? I can't.
No, I didn't. There's an artist there named Netsai, who is a friend of Paola Prestini, who runs National Sawdust, who took me over there.
Yeah.
And so I hung with Netsai a lot. So I was with local artists for sure, but I did not get to meet that person.
Yeah. No, it's but anyway, literally the coolest. It's like South by Southwest, but in Africa, and you know,
awesome. It's just amazing. It's amazing. It's truly amazing.
As soon as things, I think this year was hard, but I'm hoping if things clear up that next year a bunch of us will go down there, and I've been wanting to stream it for 10 years. You know, so just go down and just stream. You know, just build a streaming space that we bring in the artists, because the artists are all there. They're all part of that experience, and carving them away. One of the cool things about it is the fact that the artists, while they're there, they'll start improvising, and then they'll get up on stage, and you'll have someone from Africa and someone from Europe and someone from South America who made something up while they were there, performing on stage in front of, you know, hundreds or thousands of people, just jamming, you know, and just getting. I think if you even dig deep into YouTube, into my YouTube channel, you might see them playing ATEM. A bunch of them playing dun 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 dun. They're actually playing it, you know, on the main stage, you know, there. And I was just there with a camera, just shooting some of the stuff. So it's anyway. We could talk a whole hour about that too. All right. Thank you again, Todd. Just amazing.
My pleasure.
Amazing.
Thanks, everybody.
And thanks to the panelists for making, you know, the great answers and making it just a great experience for us to be there. And then thank you to the producers. Great questions. I mean, just great way to drive that conversation forward. We really covered a lot of ground. And now we're going to jump into the post show. We'll see you all tomorrow. The remotes showing off the new song tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. All right. See you, everybody.